So, following up on my previous full frame ramble, I thought I would also talk about what cameras I'm thinking about using instead of Sony cameras. I got a really great set of comments in the first full frame ramble, especially one talking about why I might want to check out Canon and the Canon R5 Mark II. And what that comment got me thinking about was, what are my 3 needs for a full frame camera system? Right? Like, I'm going to shoot the Hasselblad 907 X100C FV, whatever, for my medium format, at least until Leica comes out with a medium format camera. And I have a whole bunch of plans to use that back from the Hasselblad in a bunch of different situations, like view cameras. So more videos on that. We're not talking about that. That's actually my main camera rig. And maybe I'll make a whole video about this. But these are my main photography cameras right now. Like, the biggest project I'm working on here in Austin in terms of photography projects involve medium format photography. And it's a slow enough, basically still life project, so that I can use medium format film as well as the Hasselblad and not run into like autofocus issues or needing to catch moving subjects. So for that kind of photography, I'm covered with these 2 beautiful cameras, the Pentax 6.7 Mark II, and then of course the Hasselblad 907 CFV 100C, that is. I plan to use the back on this bad boy for a whole bunch of other projects that will involve like view cameras and putting backs on like old film cameras. Maybe I'll pick up a Hasselblad 503CW, all those things, or 503C, whatever it's called. So that's not what we're talking about in this video. For that kind of photography, I'm covered. At least until Leica comes out with a medium format camera. I'm also intrigued enough to check out the rumored Fuji fixed lens, like everyday carry medium format camera. But the fact that it doesn't have IBIS, and I've heard it's not going to have an OVF, I'm getting like less and less interested. If they take out a joystick, like, that's it, I'm out, but we'll see, but like, those are the 2 developments in medium format camera territory that might get me switching or buying new cameras. But the medium format stuff kind of moves at a slower pace. So we'll see. For what I'm doing now, the Hasselblad works great. I only have a couple lenses for it because that's all I need for it. But then for everything else, I still need a full frame system. I've been very inspired by a lot of the videos I saw, like 2 Months One Camera and like James Popsis, who have been kind of like talking about starting 2025 by paring back their gear, getting back to photography, worrying less about all the new gear and lenses and camera bodies and gas, feelings, gas feelings of inadequacy or whatever. And really kind of focusing on one camera and one lens or something similar to that. And I'm not ready to go that far quite yet, but I think I do want to focus on just one full frame system. So kind of what I've been thinking about doing is settling on one and then sticking with that for at least 3 months or maybe even till like June, and then reevaluating in the middle of the year. And I'll make videos about all of this, of course. So, the way that I've sort of categorized what I need from a full frame system is a 3-tiered system. So my top priority, the camera I need the most, that I want the most out of a full frame camera, honestly, is like a fun, small, light, everyday carry camera. So that's my top priority, and I'll get more into exactly what I mean by that. And then my next priority is like the workhorse camera. So I'm going to put that here, second priority. And that's like the event shooter, wedding photography. Like, I don't really do this, but like sports photography, I shoot some pickleball, both in video and photo. But those kinds of things where you need fast autofocus, you need a bigger body to handle bigger, more telephoto lenses, those kinds of things. That's the second category. But that comes out maybe 3 to 5 times a month for me, whereas like the everyday carry category, that is like every day I want to have that camera with me. And then the final category, like the third category that I need from a full frame camera, kind of, is like a cinema camera. Now, I know that doesn't really have to be full frame, but again, going with the theme of staying in one system, I think that can be done as part of this whole sort of thought exercise and probably purchase, wallet abuse exercise. So a third category would be like, higher end cinema camera that I probably don't need. And depending on the brand, like a flagship hybrid mirrorless camera probably fits into that slot. So thanks to some of the awesome comments I got on that full frame ramble about Sony cameras, and one in particular, really kind of like advocating for the Canon R5 II, I put Canon in this sort of heuristic, this 3-tier heuristic. And the problem is that they don't have any fun everyday carry camera yet. So like they don't really fit in. I agree that the R5 II is like the perfect workhorse camera. And then I think like the C80 would be like a really, really intriguing camera. It's a little more than I would need, but the price is right or okay. It's affordable enough. It's as expensive as like a flagship mirrorless camera, and it's got a lot of great cinema features, triple gain sensor. I think it's got internal NDs. So I would check it out if I switched to Canon. It's also rumored that Canon might come out with like an FX3 competitor. So that would probably also fit in that slot, like an R5C that doesn't, kill a battery in 3 minutes type of a camera. So, that's all to say that, like, I really do like Canon cameras. They, of course, have their downsides. Like, I don't like the back scrolly wheel, and I think that their ergonomics are not always the best, and, like, their button customization is a little weak. But if they were to come out with a fun, everyday carry retro camera, and they avoided like the mistakes of the Nikon ZF, which I'll talk about in a little bit, put a joystick on there, put a higher resolution sensor, made it like a higher quality camera that might even compete with a Leica. If that happens, especially if it's like a rangefinder, I would probably switch to Canon at that, whatever it's going to be, that 6-month mark. But that is very much just a rumor right now, and I'm not even sure they're going to do it. I've actually heard that the Nikon ZF, while it's super popular, hasn't been that great of a seller for Nikon, that like the Z8 sells 3-to-1 over ZFs. So, I don't know if it really is a moneymaker. And if that's true and Canon's seen that, they may not come out with a retro camera. So I really want to focus on like what cameras and like, bodies and systems I can get now or seem to be on like the very near horizon. So, it seems like the Canon retro camera is so far out that that I don't want to plan on that and switch hoping for that, because I'm not really even like 50% sure that would come out. But if it does, then you do have that full lineup, right? You've got the retro everyday carry camera, you've got the R5 II in the workhorse spot, and you've got at least the C80 in the cinema camera spot. So in terms of big brands, that have a full frame, mirrorless cameras with like a full range of lenses, that kind of thing, it leaves what I'm going to call the underdog cameras, right? If Canon and Sony are kind of leading the pack, then you've got like Lumix, Leica, the L mount, and then Nikon. So let's talk about Nikon first. In that sort of fun, retro, everyday carry camera category, they have the Nikon ZF at least, right? For me, that camera is like a little too big and heavy to be an everyday carry. And I've made plenty of videos about this. Like, I like the camera, but it's got no joystick. It's got a few other things that are missing. So it's not a perfect solution. At a minimum, I wish it was smaller and lighter. I've also got a Nikon DF here and some stuff coming for that. I may make a video about that, but the DF may be like kind of outside of this paradigm. That might just be a fun, like on the shelf retro camera I take off once in a while that I can have just because I love photography. That doesn't really fit into the everyday carry thing. It's like a special occasions camera, that kind of thing. But so they do have at least one, if not two cameras in that category. I think you could also put the ZFC if they had more APS-C lenses. But I didn't love that camera. I didn't love that sensor. But that could fit in there too, hypothetically. And then, of course, for the workhorse camera, they've got this beast, the Nikon Z8. I picked one up just to test it. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it, but like I at least wanted to give them the old college try. Just like I gave Sony 2 weeks, I'm giving Nikon 2 weeks right now, primarily through this Z8. And then for cinema camera, you know, Nikon acquired Red, so I think stuff is coming down the pike in that. But I also think that like the Z8 qualifies as a cinema camera, right? You know, 12-bit, ProRes, internal RAW, all these nuts features. You know, this is as much of a cinema camera as I honestly need. So this would also cover the cinema category with the pure excitement of maybe like a Red camera coming out with Nikon Z mount. So you could swap the lenses. That's a pretty cool thing. I could also see Nikon coming out with like an FX3 type camera using Red technology and build quality and that stuff. But again, that's not even on the horizon probably in the next year or whatever, but it's nice to know it's there. So if you've been following along with this video, the last category is the L mount cameras. I'm going to talk a little bit about Leica, but I've really been thinking about the Lumix Panasonic cameras for this paradigm because they're really nicely priced, and I think they do 90 to 95% of what a Leica does, right? So, you know, in terms of that everyday carry, super light, throw it in a bag, throw it in a pocket camera, the S9 has its issues, but it does fit the bill for this category, I feel like, if they had only put an EVF on it, you know? But in terms of like form factor, how light it is very close to like kind of my ideal everyday carry camera. What I really want in this category is an interchangeable lens Q, like a Q, right? But no one's making that camera. Leica's not making it. I think they're afraid of cannibalizing their M sales. I think that's silly, and I've told them that. But you know, that doesn't exist currently. Similarly, you know, like the Leica CL, the APS-C Leica camera that they killed off a couple of years ago, the Leica CL is actually probably my favorite Leica camera of all time, and it's a real tragedy they killed it off. I may still buy one, and that would kind of slot into this category. But that camera is like 4 or 5 years old now. It's long in the tooth. It's discontinued. You know, the APS-C lenses don't work with the full frame cameras that I'll otherwise be using, even though they are also L mount. So I don't know. That's kind of another, like, kind of like the Nikon DF. Like maybe it's something just for the shelf. Maybe I'm going to start collecting some cameras, you know, low value used cameras that I just love that might not necessarily be worth anything in 5 years. I don't know. But so, you know, I love the Leica CL, and I wish they would make something like that, but with a full frame. But the closest thing to that, I think, is the Panasonic S9. You know, again, does not have a viewfinder, doesn't have a joystick, some other things that I really could use. But, you know, it is light. It's easy to carry around, much lighter than the Nikon ZF, for example. So, you know, they do have a category. They do have a camera that fits into that first category, which again is the most important category for me. Then sort of number 2 here is the workhorse camera. You know, the S5 II and S5 IIX kind of slot into that category, but I really think you need an S1R in that category. There's a big part of me that kind of wants to go all in on Lumix just because it's not out yet. And I like the sort of danger of doing that. I don't know. You know, I believe they are going to come out with the camera. And I really do think that they're just taking their time to make sure they get it right. You know, I would say if you really look back, Lumix Panasonic, they have a good track record of like taking their time and then releasing a camera when it's really ready. Like the GH7 is a monster camera. If they had made that camera taking L mount lenses instead of micro four third lenses, even with the micro four third sensor, 100%, I would be filming on that camera right now. So, you know, if the S1R is like an SL3 with Panasonic like software and technology in it, anamorphic D-squeeze, all that good stuff, open gate recording, that's like a no-brainer for me. So like to me, it's almost worth the gamble of going in now and seeing what happens. Kind of makes it exciting. And as you can probably guess, then in that third slot, the cinema camera slot, I think the S1H2 or S2H would be perfect for that. I really do think we're going to get a full frame GH7 with the 32-bit float recording and the open gate 6K, maybe even 8K, probably some features we haven't even thought of because Panasonic's really good with software. And I'll keep my fingers crossed for, you know, a better photo shooting experience, a little bit more refined photo shooting experience. And maybe also an S9 II with a viewfinder. I feel like they get killed enough for it. And Panasonic tends to listen to their customers. They might actually do something like that. That's where like Sony and Panasonic, I think, do the best, maybe, is actually listening to their customers. Canon, Nikon, I'm not sure they really do that yet. They're still in this kind of like Japanese conservative, we take very few risks mentality. Whereas I feel like Sony and Panasonic are more like, okay, let's try things and see what happens. Sometimes you get the S9. The other thing I like about the Elmont Alliance is that, like, even if the S1R and S1H2s don't come out like the next 6 months, let's say, or if they just don't even come out at all, I'll have lenses that I can then just put on the Leica SL3. I'd have to buy that again, or the SL3S. I fully recognize that the SL3S is basically an S5 II or S5 IIX in a fancy pants tuxedo, but it does actually fix a lot of the things that I didn't like about the S5 II, like the handling and build quality, the EVF, So, in a lot of ways, the only thing the SL3S is really missing when comparing to the S5 IIX that I wish they had put in is a sensor protector that comes down when you turn off the camera. Like Leica and Panasonic, you got to get on that. It's just a firmware update. But otherwise, that's kind of an ideal camera for me. I don't necessarily need a super high resolution camera because I'm in the medium format system when I need 100 megapixels of resolution for photography, at least, but a stacked sensor, 45 megapixels, even for video, no rolling shutter would be super duper nice. So, that's why I'm not going to go out and buy an S5 II or S5 IIX right now in hopes that kind of a camera, like the Z8 for the Lumix system comes out this year. So that's kind of my reasoning there. So if I'm being honest, right now I'm kind of on the fence between Nikon and Panasonic. I'm going to put up a couple of little videos here, that I filmed on a Nikon ZF, a Z8, and then this S9. I'll also throw some photos up here. Do a little camera ABC, and then I'll tell you which ones it is at the end. So here we go. So, camera A was the Nikon Z8, camera B was the Nikon ZF, and camera C was the Panasonic Lumix S9. Which one did you prefer? For my eye, right out of camera, standard profile, I liked the Lumix better. I think it's easy. That's what I'm filming in now. Playing with their RAW, it's a little easier to play with, but very similar. What I'll say though is that like the Panasonic video shooting experience is like seamless. Like there's stuff in there, you're like, oh, they thought of that. That's amazing. Customizable buttons for it and everything. It's great. Nikon is like a weird kind of, fidgety, weird spots for menu items experience for video. I think they need to kind of figure that out. By like way of example, in the Nikon, you go like video quality, it's like H.265, but then you got to go right again, and there's no indicator that you go right again in the menu, and that's how you get to change from, picture profiles to RAW. It's just really strange. Whereas like in the Panasonic, RAW is just one of the picture profiles that you just scroll through if you hit the Q button or you go into picture profiles in the menu. It just makes way more sense. But then things kind of flip over on the photo side. I will still say there's some weird stuff between photo and video with Nikon, but when you switch the button from photo to video, all the settings completely change. They don't carry over. That's really nice. I would say that it's like a much more enjoyable photo experience on the Nikon, and it's easier to get a good photo because they have EVFs on their cameras that are pretty good, and the back screens are huge and really nice. Whereas like on the Panasonic, there's some weird stuff that needs to be worked out on the photography side to make the photography side more enjoyable. And then like the S9 doesn't have an EVF, and like the S5 II and S5 IIX have crappy back screens and kind of crappy EVFs. So, it's kind of a TBD on the photo side. Hopefully they'll improve upon the S1R and they'll put a better EVF and 9-point-something.EVF. Although that 5-point-something.EVF was quite good at the time, now that's kind of like middle of the market, right? And I believe the back screen was pretty okay on the S1R. So, again, kind of like going all in, expecting that Panasonic will have that on the photo side. So it kind of is like an even playing field, Again, in video, I definitely prefer Panasonic colors. In photo, it's kind of a wash. I might prefer the Nikon. You definitely see that magenta tint that people talk about with like the Leica M11. Definitely see that in the pictures with this S9. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But that, that's like a half a touch of a slider and it's fixed. Otherwise, like the image coming out of like the ZF and the S9 are like basically equal. It just comes down to the glass you're putting in front. I would say that Nikon glass is probably a little bit nicer than Panasonic glass, but then you have Leica glass in the L mount. So, if I go with the L mount for sure, the first thing I'm going to do is buy a 35 Apo f2 to put on the cameras because that thing is just sweet. So yeah, so that's kind of my plan, as I said, is using this heuristic, this three, tiered 3-level approach. I'm going to, give 2 weeks to the Nikon. I'm going to give 2 weeks to the Panasonic. I'm going to Cuba next week. I think I'm going to take the S9 with me. That seems like that's going to be the best travel companion. So that may be a little bit of a bias. And that might give a little hint as to which way I'm leaning right now. But I haven't made a decision. I'm going to have this like sort of battle of the underdogs, battle of the underdog camera manufacturers, and then decide, focus on that camera for at least 3 months, if not 6 months up till June, and then reevaluate. So, sorry for the long video, another full frame ramble, as the title says. But just thought I'd put that out here, kind of share the journey, share my full frame, mirrorless journey here. Life would be so easy if we were still doing DSLRs, Nikon D850s or Pentax K1. It's that simple, but probably Nikon D850s. Who are we kidding? But we're not, I think mirrorless is still kind of getting sussed out in some ways. And that's why it's not a clear path. Like they're all really good, but they're all also kind of not there. Like none of these manufacturers, totally have the lineup. Sony definitely has the best of it. But if you saw my video, they don't have the magic of like a decent user experience. So, not fully there, in my opinion. Unlike the D850 that like, taking out video, taking out mirrorless, like great user experience, like the photo features are like spot on. Everything's exactly the way you want it. I think we'll get there with mirrorless, but we're not quite there yet. So, not just going to like go all in fanboy on a brand, because I think this is still a developing thing. But again, do want to keep things simple in 2025. So I'm going to pare the kit way down. I've got the Pentax 6.7 for film. I've got like a fun little like a point and shoot. I'll make a video about that. I've got, the Hasselblad 907 with like 3 lenses. And then I'm gonna have a full frame with a couple of zooms and maybe a prime or 2 for fun, a couple of like, walk around everyday carry lenses. And that's it. Really paring the kit down. So that means I need to figure out a full frame brand to do that with. And right now I'm loving the idea of going with the underdogs. I'm a little bit of a contrarian, so I like going with, the underdog, the horse in the back, the dark horse, whatever. So that's what we're doing here, comparing Nikon and Lumix. So, more to come on this, but I would love to hear your comments and thoughts below. I got fantastic comments on the Sony full frame ramble video. So I'm hoping I get similar comments that'll actually help me make my decision as I journey through this mirrorless full frame landscape. So yeah, please let me know your thoughts and comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.